Hi beautiful people, you're welcome to the channel today. If you're new here, please subscribe, and to my returning subscribers, thank you so much. Today we'll be drafting a princess dart bustier pattern, and these are the measurements and materials needed. So we'll start by marking half an inch away from the starting line. This will serve as our joining allowance for the shoulder. So I used my ruler to extend the line across. From this shoulder line, I marked 10 inches, which is my bust point, 13 inches, which is my under bust point, and 16 inches as my half length, which is also my waistline. Then I used my ruler to extend the lines across. So for my neck width, I used 3 inches. Then for the neck depth, I used 4 inches. Then I connected the dots with my French curve. Then for my shoulder, I divided my shoulder measurement, which is 14 inches by 2. Then I added 0.5 inch to that as seam allowance. For the shoulder slope, you can go down by 1 inch. Then I used my ruler to connect the slope to the neck width. Now to get the armhole, you divide your round bust measurements by 6 and add 1.5 inches to it. Then you extend the line. Now this new line will serve as the chest line. After marking that, to get my armhole curve, I got the midpoint of my shoulder, then I marked it. Then at that midpoint, I went in by half an inch. And then I divided my round bust measurement by 4 and I marked it. Then I used my French curve to connect the 3 dots together. So this is the chest line, the bust line, the under bust line, and the waist line. So I'm just using my ruler to extend the lines across. I noticed it was short. So now to mark the darts, I'll divide my nipple to nipple measurements, which is 7 inches by 2, and add half an inch to it, making it 4 inches as seam allowance. So I marked the 4 inches at my bust line, my under bust line, and my waistline. Then I use my ruler to connect the dots together. Then after that, I'll find the midpoint of the armhole and make a dot. Then I'll draw a line to connect. So to mark the dart, I'll be using 2 inches. If you have a bust size of 36 inches to maybe 40 inches, you can use 2 inches. But if the bust size is 40 inches and above, you can use 2.5 inches. So to the part going towards the center front, I marked half an inch on the under bust line and the waistline. Then on the part going towards the side front, I marked 1.5 inches on the under bust line and on the waistline. Then I used my ruler to connect the points together. So on the bust line, you go down by half an inch, you make the point, then you go up by half an inch. Then you use the French curve to make a curve. Please make sure to use your measurements. I'm using my measurements to draft this pattern. So we'll now work on the darts for the armhole. So I went down by half an inch and went up by half an inch. So I'm basically using 1 inch dart for the armhole part. Then I use the French curve to connect the line to the half inch I marked down there. So after marking the line, we're going to replace the dart, the 1 inch dart we removed from the shoulder. We are going to replace it back. So from the dart or the line under, make a straight line of 1 inch upwards, and also on your chest line, replace the dart of 1 inch. Then you can use the curve rule to draw the new armhole. So after marking this new armhole, we are going to start placing all the body measurements. So I divided the round bust measurement by 4 inches. Then I added 2 inches seam allowance. Then on the waistline, I divided my waist measurement by 4 inches. After dividing my waist measurement by 4 inches, I replaced the dart of 2 inches measurement I took away. Then I also added 2 inches seam allowance to it. And then I connected the lines together. And now we can add all the half-inch seam allowance on the shoulder and on the waistline. Add half an inch for seam allowance or joining allowance. So please watch carefully as I cut through the important lines. I had to fast forward this part because the video was getting too long. So this is how the front pattern looks like after I was done cutting through the important lines. For the back pattern, we'll start by marking 1 inch away from the edge, and this will serve as our zipper allowance. Then you can connect the line from the beginning to the end. Then we'll mark half an inch away from the starting line. This will serve as our joining allowance for the shoulder. Then as well extend the line across. So from the shoulder line, we'll mark our bust point, our under bust point, and our waistline as well. Then you can extend the line with your ruler. So I'm adding the half-inch seam allowance under the waistline. For the back neck, I'll be using the same 3 inches for the neck width, then 1.5 inches for the neck depth. I also divided my shoulder measurement, which is 14 inches, by 2, and I added 0.5 inches to it for joining allowance. Then I went down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope and I connected it to the neck width. Then we'll do the same thing for the armhole. We'll divide the round bust measurement, which is 36 inches by 6, and add 1.5 to it. Then we extend the line. So this is also serving as the chest line. So to get the armhole, I divided my round bust measurement by 4. So for this back armhole, you do not need to go in by half an inch. You do not need to go in by half an inch. Just connect the dots and that is it. So for the back dart, I'm also marking 4 inches at the bust line, at the under bust line, as well as on the waistline. Then I used my ruler to connect the dots together. Then on the bust line, I went up by half an inch. For this back dart, I'll be using 1 inch, no longer 2 inches, just 1 inch for the dart. So on the parts of the center back, I marked half inch, and on the side back, I also marked half inch. Then I used my ruler to connect the line towards the bust point. So please, you can extend your neck depth to the zipper allowance. I forgot to do that. So I'm just indicating that that 1 inch gap is the zipper allowance. Please remember to add your half inch seam allowance on the shoulder. So now we are adding all our body measurement plus the 2 inches seam allowance as we added on the front part. And on this waistline, we are going to be replacing that 1 inch that we removed plus the 2 inches seam allowance. Thank you so much for watching this far. Please like and comment. I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.